Let's start here by suggesting to you that as a beginning point for you to get better, for you to improve yourself, I have recommended all day long that people read an article by Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker, a business guru to the world, born in Austria, grew up in Germany, and spent most of his life here in California, teaching in a graduate school. As we moved into the new millennium, The Economist magazine, which is a very old magazine, one of the most prestigious in the United States, actually it's British, The Economist magazine reached out to Peter Drucker and said, would you write an essay, short essay, telling us where we are right now? So what I've suggested to you is we need to get better, so let's talk about this article. Drucker says that by and large, the times in which we live today, so we could say November 4th, 2009, are as revolutionary as the times that created the Industrial Revolution. It sounds like an overstatement, but I think he's right. There are things happening today which have never happened in the history of the world. You're out there on your own. And it requires an enormous amount of imagination, an enormous amount of experimentation to get this right. Let's just talk with one of the things he says, and here I'm going to start to engage you. We're going to talk about two changes. First, let's look at the economic world. What's happened in the economic world? Here's what I want to do. What has happened in the economic world is that we are moving from agriculture into other forms of an economy. I'm very much aware where I am. I'm very much aware that you're in the heart of one of the finest agricultural areas, not just in the United States, but in the world. And agriculture is strong and hopefully will be strong for a long time. But let's just talk about what's happening in the economy in the United States. Now, I don't want you to answer. I want you to write it down on your paper if you got it. The Industrial Revolution kicked in around 1762, 1763 with the invention of the steam engine. So it's really beginning to have some effect in 1800. Okay, so let's just use that as our beginning. In 1800, here's your question. I want you to write it down. What percent of the U.S. population farmed for a living in 1800? Write it down. What percent of the U.S. population farmed for a living in 1800? Write it down. What's the answer? 90 to 95%. We know that, right? And so even if you weren't a farmer, if you were a physician, then your patients were farmers, right? If you're an attorney, your clients were farmers. If you're a minister, your congregation were farmers. And so if you're a retailer, your customers are farmers. So it's all agriculture, right? That's 1800. Let's flash forward to November 4th, 2009. I want you to write it down. What percent of the U.S. population farms for a living today? Don't answer yet. What percent of the U.S. population farms for a living November 4th, 2009? Now, we'll know this for sure when the census comes out next year. What's the answer? It's under 5%. Could be 3, could be 2. Very small. Agriculture is still just as important as it was in 1800, and it'll be just as important in 2050. But it will not be a job producer. You can pretty much bet on that. So, these people left jobs, right? Well, let's just raise a question. You couldn't possibly produce as much food and fiber with 2 or 3% of the population as you did with 95%, right? Of course, it's wrong. Well, how could you produce as much? My grandfather was a farmer, and he would say to me, Grish, you got to have farmers. Got to have a lot of farmers. I'd say, Granddaddy, that was your time. So how are we able to produce so much food and fiber with such a small population? Mechanization, breakthroughs in biology, breakthroughs in chemistry, all those things. Technology has simply eliminated all the jobs, but increased the productivity, right? We understand that. Now, in your lifetime, there has been the greatest movement of population in the history of the earth. 200 million people left the farms in the last 20 years in China and moved to cities. 200 million in the last 20 years. Never a movement like this before in human history. So they found jobs like our people did in manufacturing. Manufacturing reached its zenith in the United States in the 1950s. In the 1950s, between 35 and 40% of the population was engaged in manufacturing. What is it? Write it down. What is it today, 2009, what percent of the U.S. population engages in manufacturing? What percent of the U.S. population today engages in manufacturing? What's the answer? 16%. There's a man who knows exactly the figure. That's correct. What did the rest of you put? Were you in that ballpark? 10? Yeah. So if agriculture doesn't produce the jobs, and manufacturing doesn't produce the jobs, the question is, where are the jobs? Where are they? McDonald's? But you only have a couple of McDonald's. Where are those jobs? Service. And Peter Drucker coined a term to describe those jobs. He said, this is the knowledge economy. That almost all the good jobs are going to be in the knowledge economy. I made a survey in Asheville, North Carolina, and discovered that right now, 50% of the jobs in Asheville, North Carolina are in the knowledge economy. Now, taking it one step further, I told the group today that a man by the name of Art Rolnick, who is the vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis, says that the number one component of economic development is early childhood education. And that's true in your area too. Okay. Now you can examine yourself in Merced and say, well, are we preparing ourselves for the knowledge economy? And I will tell you the answer is you're not. You're nowhere near prepared to enter that economy. And there's no other room to play. If you can't compete in the knowledge economy, you can't compete. That is simply the reality. The reality of all of life in biology is that if you are out of step with the environment, you perish. And we got a lot of years to demonstrate that's true. So let's talk about some small communities and what they're doing. Let's start, if I could put you on a magic carpet, I would whisk you away now to Dallas, Texas. Then I'd land you in a section of Dallas, Texas, in a section called South Dallas. That's the way we're always referred to as South Dallas, Texas. We are poor. Over half our population lives below poverty. We are not well educated. In the United States today, well, using 2000 census, the United States, the average citizen has 12.2 years of schooling, 12.2 years. In our neighborhood, the average educational level is 8.8. High school graduates are rare. We're filled with crime. We're not proud of that, but we are. Now I'm going to get you to walk down the street with me to a little school. We are all African American. There were 3 or 4 Vietnamese students, but I'm not sure that I think they've graduated now. So we're all African American. We all come from poor families. We're uneducated. And our kids score at the 91st percentile. Check us out. And here's something that ought to knock your socks off. We have never had a dropout. No child who ever began in our school system, we only go through the 8th grade, but if you began in our school system, you've graduated, or you're still in the system. No child's ever had a dropout. I start with that story to almost hit you upside the head. And I will tell you that in talking to places, I tell people, that's your challenge. And you can tell me, well, it's too hard, or you can tell me I'm too damn lazy to do it. But what you can't tell me is it can't be done, because I'll take you there and let you shake the hands of these little black children who are doing it. We did it. We did it. Now, I haven't got time to tell you the whole story. That's about a 4-hour story. But here's how we did it. This is how you're going to get things done in Merced.